number one source for hip-hop and politics. Breakdown FM.
Ain't nobody else do what we do.
Davey D hanging out with you this afternoon. Hard Knock Radio in the building with us, one of our news correspondents from the station KPFA, John Hamilton, well known in the Bay Area and actually around the country for the work that he does. Recently has made national attention with a story called Progressive Hunter. It focuses on the shooting incident that took place a few months ago here in Oakland, California on Freeway 580, a few blocks from my house, where a gunman who was on his way to the Tides Foundation, for people who don't know, that's an organization that distributes money to nonprofits that's centered here in San Francisco. This particular guy came there, body armor, the whole nine, and shot it out with the police. And people just was like blown away by it. Now we're coming to find out this particular individual is one of those many lone wolf type of terrorist that has been feared would start to surface in this climate, this political climate where people are trying to light sparks and really push people's buttons. He's one of those individuals who was getting his marching orders from Glenn Beck from Fox News. Talk about your article, John.
Yeah,
Did I miss anything in mentioning this?
Well, no. I think it is important to point out that Byron Williams, the man we're talking about here, 45-year-old unemployed carpenter from about 3 hours east of our backyard here in the Bay Area. Byron Williams was a fan of Glenn Beck. He was a big fan of Glenn Beck. He told me to go back and watch all of Glenn Beck's programs from June of 2010. And that's when he was watching a conspiracy theory.
You interviewed Byron.
Yes, I went to the Santa Rita jail on 2 different occasions and spoke to Byron Williams. I also went up to Groveland, a little town up next to Yosemite, talked to his mother and talked to the neighbors who had overheard him on election night of 2008, for example, shouting racial epithets at the president, say he was going to, I can't even repeat it, he was going to kill the guy, is what he said. So I talked to Byron Williams on 2 different occasions in the Santa Rita jail. It's true, he was a fan of Glenn Beck. He said repeatedly to me to go back and watch episodes of Glenn Beck's program from June. And that's when, and we'll get into this in a minute, that's when Glenn Beck was spinning this conspiracy theory. It's patently false. That doesn't matter. In Byron Williams' mind, it was true. And it was a conspiracy theory about the Deepwater Horizon oil rig disaster, George Soros, the Obama administration, the Center for American Progress, cap and trade. Ultimately, this guy, who is an unhinged individual, in his mind, after watching this conspiracy theory on the Glenn Beck program, he was so incensed over the BP oil disaster and the images of, the pelicans covered in oil, and in his belief that George Soros, the billionaire investor, the guy who funds liberal organizations, doesn't really fund the Tides Foundation very much, but in Byron Williams' mind and in Glenn Beck's world he does. That's why he targeted Tides, because of this sort of insane conspiracy theory posited on the Glenn Beck program.
Let me ask you this. We've done a number of shows, and here in the Bay Area there's been a number of organizations, Center for Media Justice among them, that have focused on bringing to the public's attention the hate speech that is allowed to go unchallenged on radio, the broadcast radio. The Michael Savages of the world, the Glenn Becks on TV and on radio, the Bill O'Reillys and others. And there's been a number of incidents or increased hate crimes and all these types of things that have shown up. How is it that they are able to continue to do things like this? Meanwhile, we have musicians and artists, rappers in particular, whose words are bleeped out. I'll give you a perfect example. In the song Why, that was done by Jadakiss, he says George Bush knocked down the towers, bleeped out. Kanye West talks about pathologies in the ghetto, and he says that the white man, gets paid for that, bleeped out. Lauryn Hill was catching a lot of heat because she said something. I mean, we can pick all these artists where, when they make political statements that are poignant, it's bleeped out. Now, if they're cursing and talking about pimping and hoeing, it's played all day. And meanwhile, across the dial, and in the same company, meaning the radio stations are owned by the same broadcast companies, the Glenn Becks of the world are allowed to conjure up conspiracy theories, have folks, pick up rifles and act on them, and nothing happens. We can't even do a concert in Mountain View without going through the police, who have said, well, we don't want certain acts performing here because they may incite violence. So therefore, we got to shut it down. How is this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge, tremendous double standard here. I mean, talking about, you mentioned Michael Savage. Michael Savage was another influence on Byron Williams. He cited the fact that he listened to Michael Savage in a separate interview he did from jail with Examiner.com. And also, when I talked to the neighbors of this guy, Byron Williams, at the time of the election in 2008, he was so mad that there was going to be a black president that he would turn on Michael Savage and blast it through his heavy metal, apparently his heavy metal guitar amplifiers. He was a heavy metal musician. The neighbors said he's never heard an AM radio go that loud. He would blast Michael Savage for hours on end. If you were listening to Michael Savage at the time of the election in 2008, you would have heard him warning about a bloodbath coming to America if our worst fears are realized. In other words, if we elect Obama. Turn on the Glenn Beck program, and you'll see this double standard here. Here's some of the rhetoric that you're going to find on Glenn Beck's radio show or his TV show. These are some quotations. The clock is ticking. The war is just beginning. Shoot me in the head if you try to change our government. You have to be prepared to take rocks to the head. The other side is attacking. There is a coup going on. Grab a torch. Drive a stake through the heart of the bloodsuckers. They are taking you to a place to be slaughtered.
So he's advocating this.
These are all direct quotes from the Glenn Beck program, and I could go on. There's any number of these. And you're right, Davey. There's a huge, tremendous double standard. For example, like in the music arena, hip-hop artists aren't able to say things on the air. This guy is doing this to an audience of sometimes 3 million people a day.
Wow. That's the voice of John Hamilton. He's from our news department here at KPFA. If you don't know him, if you don't recognize his voice for people outside the Bay Area, that's who he is. He just did a big article that is getting a lot of traction called Progressive Hunter, and Glenn Beck is now starting to respond to this article because I guess he doesn't like being attributed to these types of acts, even though he is, out there stirring the pot, so to speak. Yeah,
well, we're recording this interview on Thursday afternoon. Glenn Beck said he was going to expose what he called Fabian socialism in California on his program that airs in an hour's time. I don't know what to expect. He certainly has a record of attacking his critics and people who he assails, like the Tides Foundation, right? So in a year and a half leading up to the shootout, Glenn Beck targeted the Tides Foundation, this liberal charitable organization in San Francisco. He verbally assailed it on 29 different occasions, including several times in the weeks leading up to the shootout, episodes that Byron Williams repeatedly told me to go back and watch. In the face of the shootout, Glenn Beck knows that this guy was going to San Francisco to kill people, as he said, kill 11 people,
right? Because
he believed this insane conspiracy theory posited in part by Glenn Beck. He kept telling me to go back and watch these episodes. Glenn Beck knew this. People confronted him over it. And in response, I want to play a clip here, Davey. This is Glenn Beck at the end of September with a warning to the Tides Foundation.
I just throw this message out for the people at the Tides Foundation. I'm coming for you. Oh, I'm coming for you. Oh, no, not a Glenn Beck making threats? No. Nope. I'm just going to reverse all the things that you have done. All the things that you have done. The tide is about to change.
So here's a guy, if you're just tuning in, that's a clip from Glenn Beck talking about coming for the Tides Foundation. He couches it the way that artists who want to avoid being held accountable by saying it's entertainment. It's not what he really meant. He's using metaphors. Yet, we've had people get sued. One of the biggest incidents was Tupac. If people may recall, back in the early 90s, there was an officer that was shot by a guy who said he was listening to Soulja Story by Tupac. And it went to court and the whole nine, and it was a real big thing. A lot of records were pulled off the air. People were under pressure to, really police themselves on the airwaves, including my old radio station. So I'm trying to figure out how this is first of all, are these people that come under attack, are they able to sue back because of this inflammatory rhetoric and the actions that come about. If somebody had gotten killed at the Tides Foundation, how come Fox isn't held accountable with the FCC, with the lawsuits?
Yeah, I mean, it's really remarkable. And the only reason why nobody got killed in this case is because Byron Williams was apparently drunk driving on his way into San Francisco. So the CHP pulled him over. They went up to, the driver's seat. Instead of a license and registration, he pulled a gun.
Right.
He was wearing ballistic body armor. That saved his life. It's really remarkable. And, and Davey, that clip that we just played of Glenn Beck, after this shootout, he knows full well that, he's attacked Tides. He's the only figure on television who's attacked Tides on a regular basis. Byron Williams acknowledged to me that, actually he said he had learned about Tides earlier from other right-wing figures, but when he saw it on the Glenn Beck program, it validated, right, his hatred. So, it's amazing. The guy goes on the air, repeating these attacks. And the way that it's viewed by people like Byron Williams, I think I need to play another clip of Byron Williams in his own words. This will sort of explain how a portion of Glenn Beck's audience sees and hears the message from Glenn Beck. Okay, so this clip we're going to play, and it's going to be Byron Williams, and he says, Glenn Beck will deny everything about a conspiracy, he'll deny everything about violence, but he'll give you every ounce of evidence you could possibly need.
Okay.
In other words, when he says, I'm not being violent, he's being violent.
I'll tell you, Beck is going to deny everything about violent approach, deny everything about conspiracies, but he'll give you every reason to believe it. Yeah. See, he's protecting himself, and you can't blame him for that. So I understand what he's doing.
Do you think he's got a political movement? Hundreds of thousands of people came out to hear him speak.
I think so.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of thousands of us, yes. Yeah, it's coming down to the line, and these controllers are not backing off. They want total control. They're going to try to get it. And more and more people are waking up.
So that's the voice of Byron Williams, the 580 shooter, as we call him in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Man a few months ago who was on his way to San Francisco to shoot up progressives based upon getting all this information and getting riled up from Glenn Beck.